to have you as an audience for our discussion on the topic of climate change education. We are here with two of my fellow students who are also members of the Climate Academy, Linnea and Christelle. We also have the founder of the Climate Academy, Mr. Pai, and the co-founder of the Climate Academy, Mr. Viken. And we are really honored to have Ms. Simanovska and Ms. Kristina today with us. They are going to be our guest speakers. So in the first place, Mr. Pai is going to have a small presentation about the Climate Academy. So you know where we are coming from, and it sets the point for the discussion. So yeah, we'll have Mr. Pai talking first, and then we'll come to the speakers again. Oh, you have to turn it on.
Okay, so just to repeat, thank you so much. Fantastic to see all these faces that have become familiar over the last few days. And yeah, I'm just going to throw out, let's call them thought bombs, 5 thought bombs. And these are just metaphors or concepts which plug into a systems level of understanding about climate change, getting us to think about it systemically. As we will discuss, as Omar so rightly said, this is about education and raising educational levels and the environment to a much higher level than where they are now, because it's so critical that we have a good understanding. So, could somebody push?
We're trying to get the blinds on because it's not
Are you trying to get the
visible.
blinds? It's okay. It feels a bit like a spaceship in here. Okay, so one of the problems I think in education, which you can talk about in more detail later, is that we have subjects which are like specialisms. So we drill into details in biology, or physics, mathematics, history, and so on, but we then lose sight of the bigger picture. And this problem is actually visible in a bit of philosophy. So this is called the Sorites problem. And in the Sorites problem, basically it's a ancient Greek problem, because when does a bit of sand, when does that become a heap? When do you go from one grain of sand to a heap of sand? Is it 3 bits of sand sort of stacked on top of each other? No. Is it 9? No, that's just like sprinkles or something. So at what point do you flip into a new state? And it's ambiguous. It's actually mathematically ambiguous as well. Niels is going to go and do maths, but you find out the answer to that. Now, the thing with the Sorites paradox is that if I put my face really close to this, it goes black. Well, if I put my face really close to it, I wouldn't be able to see the difference between any 2 adjacent colours. They just look identical. But it's clear from here to here that it goes from yellow to red. But if you're right up close, you cannot see any difference between the 2 adjacent things. And this is the Sorites paradox. And it's rather like climate change, in that each day there's no major difference, but over the long term we have shifted a galaxy from one settled equilibrium, the Holocene, into an Anthropocene, where things are going to be radically different. And yet it doesn't feel like anything is happening. So this difference between zooming in on details and seeing the big picture is really difficult to manage. And education has a difficult challenge there. Okay. So, the next problem. A little bit the same problem in education, in that these are, we could imagine these as different chunks of education, and this is in fact a park in Durham, and I walked past this. I mentioned it in one of the schools this morning, and in this park there are these trees, and there's little bits of sculpture on the trees, and from the outside it just looks a mess. On the outside it doesn't look like it has any, it just looks a little bit like a children's play area. But if you sit in this tree here, there's a seat inside that tree, you sit, and if you line your face up exactly right, everything then takes on an energy. You can see how everything fits together, and you get one picture. This picture. And the sculpture, it's a sculpture, it's called the Upper Room, and this is Jesus looking at his disciples, his 12 disciples. So from the outside, it looks just like random, but from the inside, it takes on like a synergy, an energy. And this is a sculpture about religious belief, because from inside a religious belief, things have a meaning and an energy and a synergy and a coherence. But from the outside, people looking at people being religious, it looks like dead. Like, what are you doing, weirdo? Okay? So, this is the same in the climate. That once you see things in the climate from the inside, you get it, then suddenly you cannot not see it. It's everywhere. And it has this energy. You think, well, why are they not reacting to this detail or that detail? Because you've been put in this place where you can see everything. So this is my second image. And again, in education, how do we put students in that seat? Given that we have an educational system that is always specialized in these details, like this. Okay, so we're going to go further a little bit now with some animals. This is actually a fictional animal. It took me, I wanted to know what that was. Apparently it's a saber-toothed squirrel, but it doesn't actually exist. Mr. Buchanan will be able to confirm as a biology teacher, this was just an animated animal. So, let's just call it a squirrel. But he knows he can do amazing things accidentally. So at the beginning of every Ice Age film, he has this little acorn, and yeah, you know the thing. He puts it down, then crack, and then he causes like a new geological era. So one small thing. Now that has been true in all of history, all of geological deep Earth history. Small things can trigger massive changes. Just ask anybody who has a peanut allergy what a peanut can do. Yeah? And in the past, this has been the case also for like the mitochondria. Thank you, he knows. That in all these extinction events in the past, the first one was triggered by tongue bacteria, cyanobacteria, but that wiped out a massive percentage of life. So in a way, in education, what we want to do is we want to achieve these moments where we get leverage. We want to achieve sudden change, because the status quo, it can't be done in education through syllabus reforms, slow syllabus reforms. The carbon budgets are too tight for that. So as educationalists, we have to think, how do we supercharge change? And the good news about that, and just the last bit on this squirrel, is that rapid change also happens in social contexts. So societies are complex systems. And when you do complex system analysis tells us that small changes can have sudden tipping points in them. So we should be gearing our education, I think, towards these tipping points, or constructing our educational things with the environment with this in mind, that we could achieve radical change. Okay, Turkey. So let's call him Valters. So this is Valters the turkey. Sorry, I've been picking on Valters all week. This is Valters the turkey, and Valters, when he he's fed every day. And every day there's a little sound, like the seed in the bucket. And Wouters, when he hears that noise, goes out into the yard. Sorry, I'm really struggle to carry on with Wouters. But I've said it, so we keep going. And the turkey, let's just call it turkey. The turkey goes out to the yard and starts pecking and eating. Every day it's the same. It's the same rhythm. A little shake of the bucket. Out he goes, that's the signal. Out he goes, eats the corn, and then has the rest of his day. So by September, just the sound of the bucket, or even just the sound of the farmers coming out of his door, is a trigger for Wouters to know that he's about to be fed. So we have like Happy Wouters Day, every day. But suddenly, it's Christmas Eve. So the same noise, the same sound, the same everything, but this is not going to end happily for Wouters. So, just because the past has a certain pattern to it, it doesn't mean that the future is going to be the same. And that's true for the environment in terms of, yeah, we've inherited this remarkably stable equilibrium, but it doesn't have to be like that. These sea levels don't have to be there. So, in chaotic systems, you can have sudden changes. So, in a way, I'm trying to be optimistic. I know today didn't end well for Wouters as a turkey, but there are positive examples of sudden change. A horse. Got 2 more to go. So, animal now, the horse, but it's not a normal horse. It's a Trojan horse. So this Trojan horse is famous in Greek mythology because, as you know, there were soldiers inside. He got pulled into the city of Troy. How they came, it was way. Okay. The bit of the story that is less well known is Cassandra's role. And in fact, in the Greek literature, as it developed over time, her role became more prominent. So the myth, if you like, or the very deep myth, her role became more clear. And basically, I need to tell you a little bit about her Wikipedia page. So if you look at Cassandra on Wikipedia, she had a rather fruity backstory. So she was so attractive that the god Apollo wanted to have a cup of tea with her and other stuff. And as part of the deal for the cup of tea and the cuddle and the rest of it, he promised her the ability to see the future. The deal was done, she agreed, but so she was given the gift to see the future, but then at the last minute, she backed out. She changed her mind. She had the right to. But anyway, the point is that the god Apollo did something rather twisted. Rather than take away the gift of seeing the future, she could keep it, but nobody would believe her. So now we go back to the horse. When the horse is being dragged towards the city, Cassandra is there, and she's screaming at them, saying, "What are you doing?" I mean, it is a bit stupid. I mean, it is a bit stupid. So this is another educational puzzle, in that we very well know the science. Like for decades, the climate science has been so crystal clear, and yet, weirdly, there's no reaction. So we know it, she's saying it, but weirdly, people are deaf to it somewhere, somehow. And how do we get over that somewhere, somehow, human civilization is deaf to climate change? Well, it's a weird Greek deep truth. And finally, the people. So this is a beetle, but it's made out of chocolate. But you would struggle to eat it because it looks like a beetle. Now, the thing here is Daniel Kahneman, in his Nobel Prize-winning economic book about thinking fast and thinking slow, in order to eat that beetle, the bit of your brain, which is the thinking slow bit of your brain, has to overrule the thinking fast bit. So you pick it up, you say, "It's okay, it's made out of chocolate." I've seen the cook make it out of chocolate. I can eat it safely. My friends say, oh yes, it's chocolate. But all the short-term sensory thing is saying, don't eat it. It's a beetle, you idiot. So we have a conflict in trying to eat that chocolate as an individual, in this combat, this battle between thinking fast and thinking slow. And it's the same politically, I'm sure you're very aware of that, in that political agendas and economic agendas are driven by these very short-term goals, and where they have to be pleasing, they have to satisfy people, they have to, and long-term, we have this scientific capacity to understand that that is actually edible, and we have to eat it. Even if it looks on the surface to a little bit distasteful, that's actually a bit like a lot of environmental things. On the surface, they don't look so comfortable, but actually once you do them, oh, this is quite nice. A bit like when we travelled here on a boat for 45 hours. 45 hours travel sounds terrible, it's actually great. So, those are the kind of thought bombs, those are my 5 thought bombs. Oh no, I've got a 6th one, sorry, there's one last one. And this relates to that point. So, just to finish, this is Aaron Ralston, and several years ago he was on a walk out in the Blue Mountain range, and he fell down a canyon, and a rock fell on his arm, and he got trapped. So he couldn't get out. He was going to die there. So he had about 5 days to think about his last moments in the world. He scratched messages to his family in the rocks, and all he had was a few burritos, a little drink, and a knife, a little pocket knife. And on the 5th day, he was so delirious, he really was like, but he looked at his arm again, and it started to go septic, started to like really, and then he had the thought, okay, maybe I could chop my arm off and then escape. But of course, he has to do his own surgery with the blunt knife. But he did it. He chopped off his arm, and he escaped out of the canyon, and he was saved by some Dutch tourists who recognized a rather bemused, like lost kind of guy with half an arm, and they rescued him and so on and so on. Now that in a way is a situation where what we have now, we have to make some difficult decisions, there's no question about that. Some decisions are going to be really difficult, but if you don't do them, what's the alternative? The whole biosystem collapses. So those are things to chew on as we think about education and how we can overcome these blocks and these things.
Thank you really much, Mr. Pike. I think you gave everyone a clear overview of the urgency of the situation regarding climate change. And now we are going to have a discussion. The Climate Academy is going to have a discussion with Ms. Szymanowska, who is a member of the Latvian Parliament and also a member of the Progressive Party, and with Ms. Krasina, who I believe is a coordinator of project at the Technical University of Riga. But I would like to hear more about you and the reason you accepted to join us today. If you could start maybe with Ms. Szymanowska.
And thank you actually for inviting me. And I'm quite excited to be here and actually listening to what you said. Part of that I also wanted to say is that really this complexity of the issue and need for systemic understanding, this is so important, and I'm really glad to be here. My first education, actually, let's start with my first education and why I started with my first education. I'm a chemist, and actually I need to say it's a very good choice for education, because if you are ready to do chemistry, so if you are getting diploma in chemistry, you are able to do anything else. So that's chemistry is quite nice and quite difficult. But the reason why I went to chemistry was that that's from my childhood. I was always thinking, why the species are dying out. I was quite aware about species dying out. I was reading books about that, and I felt quite bad about that. So I decided that I need to go in environmental protection. And then when I finalized school, chemistry was one of the choices. If you want to do environmental protection, you need to go into chemistry. So that was my decision. And so I studied chemistry because I thought, when I will study chemistry, when I will understand what is happening in the environment, then I will be able to rescue that. So I started to be a scientist and a researcher. And then when I studied chemistry and when I understood what is going on into the environment, I was one of the first contributors into Latvia with regard to data-based environmental reporting. I understood that actually, that you know that there is something bad, you don't help with that. So I'm aware about that. I see that things are not going very well. If you will learn more about sustainability, you can read about Club of Rome and the limits of growth. That started when I was born already. That started some half century ago already. Nothing is changing. We know where we go. Nothing is changing. So I thought that maybe we need to find solutions. So that's why I went to Riga Technical University to study eco-design. So I made my PhD in eco-design. So I thought if I will be engineer, the things will change, because as an engineer I know what to do. And you know, that you know what you can do, that doesn't mean that you can influence. Because what you see is that there are many answers what we need to do. Actually, science is quite well aware what we need to do, but we are not doing that. So we are not taking our solutions. That was a time when I started to study human behavior. So I went to Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences, and together there we were looking at human behavior, and I started to understand how we can influence human behavior so that the humans are really doing these very good choices. And after some time I understood that you need to go to politics if you want to do real changes, because as an expert you can always say we need some changes, and as an expert you can show I know the right answer. So, but nobody is listening to you. So as an expert you can walk around the parliament and you can tell everything, and nobody is listening to you. So that was my motivation why I joined Progressives, because firstly I wanted to have a party for what I can vote, and secondly, yes, I understood that actually if you want really changes, that's one of the issues. Yeah, that's about so far my way to the politics, and well, I hope that it will change also in future in a way that we are currently much more aware of what is going on with regard to environment and also about climate change, and maybe that not everybody needs to go to policy to change something. Maybe also experts are really necessary needed. But yeah.
Thank you really much for your answer. You said lots of really interesting things we are going to be discussing further during the discussion. Can we have you?
Yes, you can have. So first of all, I want to say thank you for invitation, and I also want to say I feel a lot of appreciation that I know Jana. She has done a lot, and I know her since a couple of years, or maybe already many years, and all what she has done, it's always with a lot of passion in, and I think that's very important in life. To whatever you do is to go with the passion, and even if you don't find the passion, then find the people who can make a community. So at the moment I'm involved with the Riga Technical University, I work for Science and Innovation Center and run some educational programs for different target groups. But my kind of, let's say, eager target, one of the most, say, the target group I love to work is youngsters. And also the youngsters and teachers. So I had a program which, I mean, as a university, we don't work with this target group particularly, but this was my initiative that we should do some work, and there is a program I'm running, and I'm trying to attract funding. And it doesn't mean that if I'm in university, I can do whatever I want and funding comes from just directly to me. No, it's not like that. But what I want to say that I felt that it is good to work with youngsters because there is a lot of potential, and I found out that a lot of youngsters are worried about what is happening, and at the same time work with teachers. And I know that here in the audience there are a lot of or number of people who are from the Riga city, from the gymnasiums, but we as a country, we have a lot of schools outside the city and in rural areas, and I found it very fascinating to work with those because sometimes there's lack of not just knowledge, but in general, like the feeling of what is happening and not thinking about these topics at all. So I find very important to work with teachers and strengthening them and giving space for them to talk how it's going on in their lives, but at the same time talking about the systems approach, about that we need to think what we are doing with one hand or the other. And that's one of the activities I do in the university. But at the same time, I actually, since my school times, I'm passionate of communities and grassroots activities. So at the moment, I'm involved with in a couple of NGOs in different capacities. I'm in or voluntary basis, or I have some time to time some projects. But I feel that in the NGO sector, there comes together people who are sometimes maybe not so well-funded, working in so well-funded projects, but they have this passion. And as Jan mentioned, she's coming from that sector as well. But I see in my life that I need a balance in different, like what kind of people I meet and to whom I talk. So there is an NGO and there is a university level, and then I try to also be in the relationship with entrepreneurship, enterprises or business sector. That is harder for me, but a bit different speed and attitude. But I also see that because my colleagues in Riga Technical University work with the business sector, I see that there are more and more startup people who are actually really thinking about sustainability and not just about environment, but also about social, economical aspects. So this comes in. But at the same time, there are a lot who are not thinking about that, and they need those laws and rules coming from top down, that they have to do something.
Thank you for introducing yourselves. And I would like to point out that all of you five have in common the fact of working with young people or have worked with young people. So I would like to first ask you a question on your experience on teaching or being taught about climate change. If you want to talk, if you want to say something, please you can put up your the papers with your name on it, or if someone wants to start. Yeah, please.
Yes. So hello everyone. I'm Gustavs, and actually I had nothing to do with climate until the start of this year's September. And then Mr. Pai came to my classroom in Latvian and he explained the project. We went to Latvia to a first trip in November with the Climate Academy, and beforehand, for me, the climate, I thought I knew everything. I thought like greenhouse effect, understandable. We just need to stop putting gases in our atmosphere and we will solve everything. But then I learned it's not that simple, and Well, just as Mr. Pai, it's only by chance that I had the opportunity to learn about climate, and I think that should not be the case again. It should not be because of a Mr. Pai that comes to my classroom that I should learn about these essential things, actually. And I just think that this education about climate, it should be available to everyone and every student, which is not the case.
I would like also say the opportunity to thank you again to join, and I think you have pointed out two aspects which are really important for all of us. That you mentioned that we need 3 dimensions for the solution, having a global understanding, be active, and the entrepreneurship can also help to have a conviction that we can do something. So I'm really glad that you have pronounced because that's exactly what we try to do with the Climate Academy. It's exactly the 3 pillars we try to stand the Climate Academy, because as Gustave said really truly, that we have only a partial view in geography lesson, in history lesson, in biology lesson, of what is really the bioclimatic crisis. So with the Climate Academy, that's exactly what we try to give to the student, that yes, you need to have a good understanding, but you can act, and developing such an event like today's, it develops skills, and it develops also a positive feeling that they can do something and they will succeed. Thank you.
I think it was really precious what you said about the students having the motivation and believing in themselves. And this actually brings another question of if you would think that the students and the teacher have the capacity, the ability to teach properly climate change on a more systemic level. So, yeah. If anyone wants to... Yes,
Well,
please.
yes.
Of course, you can.
I think yes, and I think it is also important to do that because if you look at the climate change, sometimes people really like simple answers, but the problem is that you can't have simple answers to very complex problems. And I think sometimes I was also coming here, I was thinking what you really need to know, and then actually I saw that there are two important, let's say, skills or competences. One is systemic thinking, what we started already, and also, and second is life cycle approach. Systemic thinking you already heard. I hope you understand what is meant with that, so that you can see a whole system and study it about the life cycle approach. If we would like to change something in climate, we really need to understand that, what it means. If we look at chair, we are not only thinking about impact of this chair to the environment. If we would like to produce better chairs or with lower impact to the environment, that means that we need to start from very beginning. When you are just extracting, mining the raw materials or cutting forests for wooden parts. So you start with very origin of raw materials, and then you study what happens till the chair is produced. So this is life cycle of chair, and that is not enough. So you also look what happens then when you don't need this chair anymore, or this chair is not usable anymore, it is used. So how it goes away. And if you look at all products from this life cycle perspective, then you also can understand how you can get the best solutions. So that's why I would say that really this thinking about this life cycle approach is very good. And from what I also know that it is easy to explain, but how you can get skills work in that, and the only what I can tell how you can get skills in that is to do that. So if you often practice in lessons or also in your own life, if you practice this life cycle approach, that when you need to solve something, you start to think from beginning till the end, you will acquire these skills and you will use this naturally. And that's the same with this systemic thinking. If you are doing certain things and if you are trying not to study one single point, but to see how the whole system works together, you'll also acquire these skills in systemic thinking and also in how you can analyze complex systems. So I would say, yeah, it is. You simply need to know some methods how to do that. Of course, life cycle assessment is one of the methods, but you need to practice that. And with practicing that, you will do it later on. And I think that's very good when you start it already in school, because these are very good, how to say, skills or competencies. And these skills will help you later on. I can give perhaps one interesting example where life cycle thinking helps you. It was, we were a company of friends, and we wanted to take a travel, but when we reached a bus, the bus was gone. We needed to wait for 2 hours or call a taxi. And now we need to decide, call a taxi, which is more expensive than the bus, or wait for bus. But then we saw there is a restaurant, so we can also go to restaurant or go with taxi. Now, what is the best cheaper option for you? To sit in restaurant and wait for next bus, or to take a taxi and go to your place and get dinner there? What is cheaper for you? How you will find what is cheaper for you?
It is a pressing point where nothing is clear anymore and it's complicated to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think this is where you're right.
And how you would calculate your cost in this moment?
Yeah.
So
You need the bigger knowledge, you need the knowledge on each step.
exactly.
Actually. And yeah.
And in first beginning, you would say that taxi is more expensive, right? Because bus is much cheaper. But when you go to restaurant and when you would like to eat, you will not sit in restaurant just with one coffee, right? You will have something to eat. So, and that's why you need to combine both prices. So you need, in one moment, you need to say bus price plus dinner in restaurant, or the other is taxi price together with your dinner at the place. And only then you can compare what is really cheaper for you. And that is this systemic thinking and also life cycle approach, that you are not counting only the cost in that moment when you think about that, but yet that you are looking at longer perspective and you try to understand what will be your way in longer perspective. So you develop scenarios, I would say. And this skill you can really develop. That's simply, if you apply it, you will do it.
Sorry, just thank you really much. I think your analogy underlined the principal concept we are going for, and it is to understand everyone that it is so important to have a global view, a general view, and a way, the tools to be able to make the best decisions and to understand the climate change actually. I mean, right now we are talking about climate change, so yeah, but I think it applies, as you said, it to every steps of our life. but I would like to know, you know, these things are complex when you think about it, and I think that they are not maybe sometimes accessible to everyone. So what are the ways in which we could help the teachers or the parents, you know, the elders of the youth of today, to help them to guide their children or the younger people they know, to be able to make these connections and how to teach them that, because it's clearly not the way we are taught in today's society. You know, in schools we have these silo systems where every class is in some sort of bubbles. So how would you actually, you know, combine all of these bubbles to obtain this kind of education at the end? This is, which is really, I'd be wondering.
It's an actually not easy question.
From your
But
experience.
I was thinking about also the previous topic where we went already with what Jan said, that I thought that more you know, more challenging it becomes, because it's easy not to know and be ignorant. Then you just, you know, you want to go to the restaurant, you go. You want to fly somewhere, you just fly. But when you know more, when you read more, when you talk to your, like, maybe community, you have discussions or maybe some debates, or you read something, you even watch some movie, then it becomes more complicated, and each time you want to make some decision, first kind of you have this inside feeling of, okay, I stop, do I really want to fly? Or instead of that, I choose other types of transport, or maybe I don't do the vacation there, but I stay here in my country and I do something else. Or if even a smaller thing, like I go to the shop and how do I choose things in the shop what I will eat? Just a simple thing, the banana in the plastic from the ecological farm, or banana without any packaging, but then you don't know where it comes from, or maybe you know, then you just look where it comes from. So all those things, I think more you, as I said, more you know, it's more it becomes more complex. And then I think in what you now asked as a question, I think nowadays I see that also youngsters are actually the ones who are stepping up and becoming the ones who are giving education to the adults. That's my observation as well. And I agree that the educational system is like complex and siloed, as you said, but there are some initiatives, or in some schools, also depends on the teachers, or who are, or even not the teacher, but the personnel who is there. It can change a lot. So I think there is not one answer, and I don't have it, because I think it goes again back to the attitude and knowledge and education of the adults as well.
I would like to. Okay, I would like to jump on something you said that was really interesting to me. You talked about the young people today who are actually teaching their elders more. How come that it is possible? You know, what do you think happens? Like, what are the crossing points? How do you think the young people of today are educated on the matter to be able to educate their elders on the matter? I mean, from the experience you have in your NGOs and with the young people you work with.
It's maybe not goes directly to my experience, but what I observed and I heard, in Latvia there is Eco School network or movement, and there are like schools who join this particular network. They are interested in environmental topics, and then in the schools they do the simple things, and also more, let's say, challenging things, like really calculating the waste or heating and so on. And in the school, and then thinking of the activities, what they could implement. And then what I've heard and noticed that if you, even in the kindergarten, they are also in the network kindergartens. So if in the school or in the educational institution, a school or kindergarten, there are, because actually we are spending quite a lot of time there, like in the workplace as well, right? So we spend quite a lot of time there. And if there is this environment where we are asked to recycle, or we are taught to do one or the other thing, and then I come back to home and I look at my parents and I see that they don't do that, and then that I, you know, as a young person, I have this question inside: what is happening? And then if the environment in the house is that we can actually talk about this, then youngsters expressing and saying like, yeah, but at school we were taught this or that, or we are doing at school like this, or teachers said this or that. And then there are some families I know who actually shifted because of what their children are coming home and saying. They shifted their behavior.
I would like also to evoke this eco school, because we are also in our school in this process of obtaining labels, etc. But from my experience and the experience of students who are involved in these eco teams, and comparing what we are developing with the students who are there, I think there is always a gap between what is expected just to have the eco label, which, as you say, are more focused on good behavior, so recycling, etc., than explaining the importance, as you say, in a life cycle of something. So I think it's really important also that our educational policy just not limitate the understanding of the huge crisis we are facing, that only good behavior could solve something. So I think it's also, and I'm really, really happy that, because it's a question I have personally for years, and I'm really happy to be able to ask you. I am French, as you can hear with my poor English. And in France, we have a huge problem that mainly all politicians have not a scientific background as yours. Mm-hmm. And don't you think that it's one of the reasons that the political world is not active enough to tackle or try to tackle the crisis?
That's quite a difficult question. I think firstly, politicians are not coming from empty place. So someone is voting for them.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is the first question: to which extent the people are taking into account the knowledge. If also we look back, for example, what happened in COVID time. In COVID time, we could really see the importance of science. And you could see also that there were quite a few science deniers. And it was obvious because it was also connected with several restrictions and so on. And we had also in Latvia that people were protesting about these restrictions because they thought that these restrictions are against their free will. And scientists are saying no, but it is all connected, related to health risks. And this was a real problem, that people which are not educated in science, they don't understand the restrictions which are put according to scientific knowledge. And there is, I don't know even right answer to that, what we can do and how we could really implement that the decisions are made based on science. And then we also heard, you mentioned the name of Kahneman, and that's exactly this slow thinking and quick thinking. And the problem is that we don't like to spend our energy on thinking, right? There are certain people who like, but majority of people are not really spending so much time on thinking. They rather act. And how we can steer the human, the mankind in this more slow thinking approach. This is really, and I think this is both, it's education, but it's also skills. And the other what I am also thinking is, I have studied eco-design, and why eco-design is important. We need to be aware that not all people will be really slow thinkers, and not everybody will be doing the right things. But you can use design approach, because you can design not only table, you can design also processes. You can design a school. You can design a process how you buy things in the shop. You can design how you give food in a school. And with this systemic approach by design, you can change people's behavior. For example, the one way how you can really reduce food waste is that you are not giving ready portions for pupils, but you are making them to choose. You can really reduce a lot of school waste, and that's just changing the design, how the school canteen is proceeding. So that means that we will not remake all people for slow thinking, but we can design our buildings, we can design our processes, we can design our policies in a way that it is more easy for people to act climate friendly, I would say.
I think what you said about slow thinking and also implementing policies is really important in the conversation we have today, because most of the time, we hear that we have a choice to believe or to not believe in climate change, to take actions or not, and that it is an individual choice. I mean, it's the idea we get in our Western societies most of the time, if you'd agree with me. So, political implementation is actually really important, as it obliges people to go on the same path. But how do you think, as a politician, this would be possible? Like, how would you implement those policies without people backfiring on you? Because when you implement policies, you also implement some disadvantages. You also take away from the comfort of people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Firstly, there are no quick things. In policy, you can't do quick things. You sometimes can do quick things, but it will have very high costs, I think. And you simply need to know your goal, and you need to go to that goal. And people are accepting new things. And if we talk, we can talk about individual approach and a systemic approach. And I can tell that what was one problem of environmental policy is that it focused too much on individual approach. We said that we need volunteers, we said that you need to be a sustainable consumer, so we educated people to act on yourself, which is very important and very good. But unfortunately, an individual cannot change a system which is inviting him to do the wrong choices, So the changes need to be on this systemic level, that the individuals are choosing the best choices. But also, of course, individual is important. And there is one thing what is really influencing what we do, and this thing is a quite powerful thing, and these are social norms. So we do things what are socially accepted. So if you in your school are trained to sort waste, when you go in your life, you will do it because in school it was typical, you did it. Or people are looking at influencers. So the influencers are not only online, the influencers are also your parents, your class leaders, your teachers. There are many influencers around. And if we can switch the influencers to do the right things, then also the people will do much more the right things because you believe that this is just socially normal. And then you need, I would say that you really need change agents, because these are these powerful, fashionable people who are going into right direction and who could also bring together others, who could be the real leaders for others. And that you could have in your class, you could have that in school. So these are people who are helping the others to accept different social norms. And for example, to understand that sustainability is a new social norm. So, and sometimes you can see it. I think some 5 years ago, maybe people were much more telling that they have bought new things. And currently, maybe it's not so fashionable.
Yeah. Maybe, Linnea, you can define yourself as an influencer for all the school and all the students we have now in the hall are influencers, because we have traveled totally differently than what we used to do. Linnea, maybe can you explain a little bit?
About the travel?
Yeah, the way we have traveled.
Yes. Well, we came here and it took us a total of 45 hours between bus rides and train rides and waiting and switching and then a 27-hour boat ride from the north of Germany till the west Latvia. And it was a process that sounded pretty risky and maybe even intimidating at times at the beginning. And I mean, we have our other classmates that are at the moment in other school trip destinations, including Barcelona and Croatia, and I mean, you know, these nice sunny destinations, and we go up north for 45 hours with a boat. But we even had this moment on the boat in which we all sat down and spent 5 minutes writing a WhatsApp message to our group on how we were living the experience. And I think overall there were some amount of monkey emojis and other nonsensical things, but I think overall the feeling, everybody's feeling was pretty positive. And now, having been here for a few days, I personally still feel like it has been a positive experience.
It's nice to hear you describe our trip again. And actually, I would like to ask a more general question on the tools that you as students think it is important that we should be given to understand climate change and to implement actions and ways of thinking in our life that would go on that way. And you also, what do you think students should be taught at your level? So maybe we can start with one of you.
Yes, I'm sorry, could you please?
The tools you think we should be given in order to grasp climate change at a systemic level, and yeah.
Well, I think the Climate Academy textbook is a good example of such a tool, because because I think it has a structure in a way that it approaches, as we discussed earlier, the climate crisis from different points of view, from the psychological point of view, economic, scientific, and from all points of view. And it means that students that are interested in very different things, they are all passionate about climate change and how to solve it. And I think it's a great example of how we can engage everything, all kinds of different people to participate in by searching for things that, well, yes, that everything is interested in, and trying to put them together and working on a solution, and everything puts in their input and their skills, that their different skills, and trying to solve this problem together.
I would just like to say, we were supposed to have a break, but I feel like the conversation is going really well right now. So if it's okay for everyone, should we just continue with the discussion? I think it's the best thing to do. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to come again to what you said. You know, right now in our schools, I think we are also lucky to have Mr. Pai and Mr. Dicken, because, I mean, as you said earlier, they introduced us to a more global view of climate change. And with Linnea, we were talking about the fact that other students, other young people don't have the same chance and the same opportunities as us in our school. You know, we are we are always with people who know what they talk about, who are knowledgeable, and we have these great opportunities. But don't you think that some of students around the world don't have access to the same knowledge as us? I mean, you know, when we read IPCC reports, we can understand the terms that are in it, or we know how to do research, but everyone does not have this access to the same thing. I mean, we all have access to information, but we are maybe not all able to understand the information. Do you maybe have anything to say about that, Linnea?
Okay, I'm gonna start from the fact that I feel like we do have a lot of information, but nowadays especially, I mean, you know, there are more fake news than ever in history, and there's a lot of information that is either false or misleading or missing even. And I have the feeling that students should be given the tools to tackle, to understand this like, for example, data, and to be able to also look at data and see its credibility and link it to something bigger. And I think that's sometimes missing. And once again, we come back to the whole idea of how we're learning very many different things in many topics, but we are often missing the link between them. And actually on this, I had a question for both of you. So you talked about the behavioral change and the slow thinking. Do you think that having this information about the climate coming from outside resources, as in outside the school system, is the answer to tackling the climate crisis? Or should it, as in instead of it coming straight from the classroom, do you believe that it coming from outside of classroom resources is the way forward?
I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
Because but first I would like to say, it's very nice that you organize such a trip.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really a courage, I would say. But and actually this is also quite important for behavior change, is just to try new things, and then you can see that it works. Yeah. Firstly, and not everybody is able to do such things. So not everybody is innovator, and people are following innovators. So that's why if you are innovator, that's a way you can really show that something is working. But what I was thinking, hearing also the conversation here, I think what is really important from my point of view is investment in good teaching tools, because many things you can also you need to go to have good books for, you need to have good readings, and also you need to have how I would say this, how to say, exercises and methodological advices. Because when I have been working with students, I had the approach that actually there is no big deal from my lectures, because they're just listening and going. And actually you are behaving very well, thank you. But very often students are simply looking at phones. So what's the matter to give a lecture when the students are anyway being somewhere else? And that's why I have been developing a lot of exercises. So I was just making them working. I made these exercises according to what I was teaching, and they needed to do this exercise. I needed to have some lessons further, and I think also other teachers perhaps would like to have similar exercises, but not everybody has enough time and passion to develop something like that. So if you can really offer to teachers methodological tools like ready-made exercises, games, role games, this really would help to promote the knowledge. Because teachers, what I know in schools, they are quite busy with everyday life, and they are not having so much time really to develop something. So such assistance would be really helpful.
I think
Yeah.
maybe Mr. Deacon could
Yeah,
have something
no,
to
I
add.
can just confirm that we are just running day after day to try to finish our program every year. It's the same. So obviously, two things are more than important: the time we can dedicate to such a subject, and also the training of the primary training of teachers. And as you say from the beginning, it's always a problem of having teachers who are specialized and dealing with climate change. We need to change totally the way we are working, teaching, and study also, because we should be able to not be an expert in every field, but be able to speak and to teach correctly in several domains. And it is quite challenging. And it's also, I think, one of the breaks we have in the educational, at least in the secondary level, that it's so difficult to implement such program because we don't have the qualified teachers to do. And I'm also really interested to hear about you because you say that you have an experience with a city area and rural area, because you are working with different teachers, youngsters, coming from these different. Can you see a difference of perception, maybe, in the about the climate crisis? Does it perceive the same way in a city area? We are coming from Brussels, so we are all person living in cities, but sometimes we have just a cliché, or we have just some prejudice about what happened in rural area. Can you maybe share with us your
Yeah, I'm thinking like how to answer. There are several things coming up in my mind. Yeah. So one thing is, I think in the cities, as you said, there's kind of, you have the perception of what is happening outside or what's happening in the nature. So when it comes to the people from the rural areas, most of them, they have garden, they do actually things in the nature. But that's one thing. But then at the same time, the connection to understand that I will go back to behavior.
No,
With
please,
it,
please,
that
please.
actually my behavior, being in the nature, or what kind of things I do, even like, do I not understand how to make a compost pile, which would be also part of the system, right? So to understand that it is a resource. So I have this feeling that yes, everyone in the rural areas know what is compost, but then actually they don't, and then which is like normal thing in Latvia, would be normal thing, especially in the countryside. So I think there are different challenges in the city and in the rural areas, and still I would say that the lack of the systemic approach is missing everywhere. And but at the same time, I see that there are, again, I'll go back to the passionate teachers, but there are those couple of passionate teachers in the city and also outside who are actually eager to make either, even not maybe create new methods, but actually to observe and take from what is provided, that they're ready to take and put in practice and experiment. Because a lot of people are afraid to experiment. And also I think in the schools to experiment, because there is no time to do that. So then again, going back to the systemic thinking, I think there is not really a difference in this, but there is different aspects popping up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to, like we were talking also about this, about the topic that there is those influencers. So I thought that youngsters here are influencers, that's for sure. But if we look at the innovation as such, that there are always the ones who are first, who are actually, they like to, even in the marketing, it's easier to, if there is a new chocolate in the shelf, they will be the ones who will take and try. Or if there is, and then just later some other will join, and then there are like late comers who are like, no, I still want to have my own thing. So I think recently it's more also about this behavior part, as you said, about if we convince influencer in the school, or some the people who try different things, and they are the ones who are the front runners, so to say, then actually there'll be crowd following. It will not be fast, but slower, but still there'll be. So I wish to all of you to kind of develop skill that you are trying and being the ones who are actually experimenting and being the front runners if we talk about the climate change and new behavior.
No, I just think it's a great philosophy of life in a way, as you said, to jump in on everything and experiment, because well, that's my dad always says to me. He says that you can always, if you don't like what you tried, you can always go back, but you can't miss the opportunity. Sometimes it's a once in a life opportunity to do something. And well, that's also how I joined the Climate Academy in a way, and that's also a story of how I dragged my friends in. I asked them to join, and at the start they were, I don't really want to, Climate Academy. But in the end, I think they're enjoying it. So I think it's always great just to jump in on new opportunities and try new things. And I think this is one of the aspects or the keys to access young people and to solve this issue at the end. It's that we need to try new things, we need to experiment, because that's the only way we are going to overcome problems, including this one.
I think all of the things you all said were really important about influencing, about passionate teachers, passionate students, because it goes to show that not everyone has to be a professional understander of climate change, or not everyone needs to be passionate about it, but that it is still possible to hope for a better future, for policies to still be implemented, to people to still join movements after being influenced into joining them. But we all know that the climate crisis is actually a really urgent thing, So I was wondering, as a last question actually, what are your hopes for the future? Do you think it is going to be possible to attain good enough policies when you think about, for example, the Paris Agreement or all of this most known? Or if you may have a more pessimistic idea about it.
No one's turns,
No.
because it's very. I think we are facing the reality, and that's why it's very hard to answer this.
I think there are some pessimists on my left, but I think I'm a young person, and I'm a bit more. I'm hopeful about the future. Maybe it's a bit naive and idealistic, but then I'll be that naive person. But I believe that we can solve this, and I mean we can do this if we talk to people. If we can solve this. It's a bit short, but yes, I think we can do it.
I think I could. Sorry.
No, please.
I could comment on what you said, but it's actually great that you have this feeling, and what I have as a feeling that it's even if it sounded pessimistic, then actually it doesn't mean that I or colleagues next to me will not do anything, right? So because we believe that it is have to, it's you there, like otherwise it will be a snowball like running down even faster, but we have to do something to slow down it. So that's what I feel. So I'm not talking about solving, because that's a very wide description, but like slowing down, being more mindful about this.
Yeah, and if we hide behind, for example, the last report of IPCC, even top scientists who work on the topic 20 hours a day, we can say maybe they disagree, they have different point of view. Some of the scientists still want to continue believing that the objective of 1.5 degrees can be reached, and most of them just say we need to forget this objective and now focus on the limitation of 2 degrees. So I think there is no answer. I think it's more than important that we continue to be trustful and to be able to not to cope the climate crisis, but at least to adapt or to be resilient. And the less the impact will be, the easiest it will be to be able to adapt or to be resilient.
I have actually good news. And the good news are that planet Earth will survive.
Yeah.
So the question is about us.
Exactly.
And I think mankind has faced many problems. There has been Black Death several hundreds years ago, and somehow we survived. So I think the people will survive. The question is how many of them. And but people are also quite flexible and able to learn, and that's why there is a hope that we will learn more quickly and that we can really change behavior. But the one thing what I would say, I'm also skeptic, because if you look what happens around us, there are coming some things which we said, we finished these discussions 50 years ago. And I think if you look, for example, in crisis, what is happening now between Russia and Ukraine, who could believe from us about that? Nobody. And when I was a child, I thought it has been solved already. People are not anymore repeating such things. And what we see, it is going to be repeated. And we also saw democracy. Now earlier there was something else, but now we are democratic countries, and this is so nice and so good and so on. And suddenly we see that people are ready to lose their democracy. And I think this is quite alarming. So it's not only a climate, it's also how we decide. And also, from my point of view, democracy is one of the important answers towards climate crisis. So you can't solve it without democracy. And I see there also a big threat for democracy. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that if we look at the carbon budget, we're already at a 1.2 degrees Celsius rise, and examining the carbon budget and how much emissions are released at the moment, we should reach the 1.5% in about 4 years, the 2% underlined in the Paris Agreement in about 12 years. And I think that, I mean, all of this sounds negative and terrifying, even maybe anxious, but at the same time, I believe that with most revolutions, nobody could have predicted them the night before. And as I've heard Mr. Pai mention during the couple last days, studies also show that only an engaged 3.5% of the population is needed to make a difference. So I can only encourage us all to be that 3.5% and to be the change. And yeah.
Thank you, Linnea. I think it was a wonderful way to end this discussion. Does maybe anyone have any questions, or do you have anything more to say maybe? We can take questions from the audience. Yes, please.
I was just thinking, we've talked a lot about not going past or stopping at this 2 degrees, but if we manage to not go over that, what is the plan? Is the plan to just stay below, or is the plan to actually go back down? This is kind of a general question.
I think go back down will be really, really difficult, not to say impossible, in a lifespan. Clearly, we know that the global warming is ongoing and it won't stop. Even tomorrow, every country decide to stop any to release any gram of CO2 in the atmosphere. So but what we need, what we know also is that the less the consequences, the less the temperature will rise, the more acceptable for humankind it is. So it's not the deal to say we want to go backward. It won't be possible. But what we want is that the future is acceptable for all the humankind, and not only the Western or the wealthiest country who will be able to adapt. They will have more means to adapt than the others. So it's also a question of social justice and what we call also the climate justice, that we need to act not in the global interest and what we call the big South and the North at the same time. So we are not in a position to think what will happen after or during the 22nd centuries, but we need to act right now to limit this increase.
Basically, I think the first step is to basically stop. For example, as Ash said, if we stop at the 2 degrees, it's the first thing. it's also very big, and then we can start working out maybe how to go down or how to make it easier to sustain being 2 degrees. Because so I think the main thing we need to do now is to just adapt and stop the temperature to go up. Yeah.
It's different.
This is a specific question for progressive politicians. Sam Justin, are you a progressive? One of the progressives, so only Janis Simonski.
Jana is the...
Okay, then this question will be for Jan Simonski. In your opinion, how does democracy we live in right now, this democratic regime we live right now, how does it help to solve climate change? What are the benefits that other regimes don't have?
I think the care for environment, or let's say environmental justice, it belongs to democracy from my point of view. No, that's the first thing. The other thing is that actually you need to be highly efficient, and I think that democracies and societies are more efficient, because if you I have studied also biology, and you also have heard about biodiversity, and systems with higher biodiversity are more resilient, and I think it's the same for people. People with higher diversity, or societies with higher diversity, are more resilient and more also sustainable. So this is the first thing. And if we look also at other countries which are really devoted to solve climate change or to work on climate crisis, I think it is just a hypothesis, but you can try to do that. You simply place countries, how democratic they are, and how much they work on climate change reduction or other environmental problems. And my hypothesis is that the countries which are more democratic, they are also looking more responsible for the environment. But you can try to do that. Just do that and check if my hypothesis is correct.
Thank you. Well, I'd also like to answer the question. Is, in my opinion, it's because the leaders in undemocratic countries, well, honestly, why would they care about climate change? They'll long die before the effects, especially to them, before they feel the effects. And in democracies, you might feel like it's the same. We also have leaders who probably most of them not feel the effects by the time climate change hits them. But the advantage of democracies is that we, the people, we have a voice to, and we have an option to say that voice to politicians, and we elect those politicians. So, and climate change will, we will feel the effects of climate change. So in democracies, we have the advantage of, the question is why democracies will fight climate change better is that because the people who have the power in democracies, they will feel the effects of climate change more than the leaders of undemocratic countries. So I think that might be an answer.
And then maybe we can conclude of the importance of being educated, so to choose with relevancy the person for you will vote for, you will elected. So, yeah. Thank you, Gustav.
Yeah, so far most governments have prove that they're pretty ineffective and unwilling to change or do anything. So how do you think we better organize as people to push this change from the bottom up?
Did you mean all European governments or just Latvian governments?
No, just global governments overall, not just here, everywhere.
I think they are not all the same. You can see some countries which are achieving good results. So,
Like what?
Well, you need to look really who is reducing now the CO2 emissions. And you will see that countries are reducing, especially European countries. So the question is how you can achieve that all other countries are doing that. But I see there is one very, very big problem to what I don't have solution, and perhaps you will have solution towards that. Because for European countries it is more easy to reduce CO2 emissions because European countries are quite rich. If we would look at emissions per capita, the countries in South, maybe they are big emitters, but they are not emitting more per capita, per people. So, and how to disbalance that? I don't have a good answer, quite honestly.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I have one additional question I want to ask. What is your opinion on protests against certain governmental policies that impact climate change? What is your opinion on those protests? Are they beneficial?
I think Ms. Christina is a fervent believer in non-violence protestation, so maybe you have something to say about that that could join the question.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that it would go to the democracy, that we have actually the possibility to go and to say, and it's also about the gatherings and say our opinion. And here in Latvia we are not, I mean, now we have in France, you see what's happening.
Oh yeah, in France.
But I mean, it's not related to the climate change, but anyhow, right? So here in Latvia, we don't have this kind of even the culture, I would say, to go out to protest. And then I can recall that maybe Yanni, you can help me. Or maybe it was 3-4 years ago. It was actually a protest organized by young people. And it was about the climate, and it was more than 100 people, or even more actually. They were coming schools also from the other cities. I mean, people from the schools, mainly from the network of eco schools, because they were kind of encouraging that let you come and join this initiative. And it was very powerful to see that so many young people, but also not just young people, are actually coming out and saying that the climate is important for them. And it's, so that is well organized. It was that everyone understood what to do, because as I say, here in Latvia we don't have the protests as might be what you can see somewhere abroad with 10,000 people going on the streets. So I say it is one of the forms to say what we think, and it is a good form to do that.
I think an issue in Latvia is that many people don't trust the government, and I think that their voice doesn't have an impact, and that it doesn't matter if they go out to protest, it doesn't matter if they vote. And I think that's a social issue, an issue of mindset. I don't know how to change it, but I think that is a major issue. That people think that everything is bad, but they aren't doing anything to change it. And I think it's very characteristic of Latvia, especially.
But I also think that the Friday for Future movement is a powerful one, and that's true that the COVID pandemics just has a really negative impact of the dynamic the movement had at the moment. But for many countries, and for many politicians in many countries, I think it was the first huge warning that they have to do something for the youth. So obviously, when we talk about expecting having a bottom-up democracy or bottom-up process, this demonstration, this organization of constructive energy is really important, and that's particularly a French guy who said that. So demonstrate and sometimes strikes are a powerful leverage to push a little bit the habits we have and we live on. So I think we need to continue and to support this initiative.
So if no one has any more questions, I think it is a good way to conclude our discussion. So guys, protest and demonstrate. I guess, can we upload our speakers? Also, I would like to acknowledge the fact that Francisco made it possible to broadcast this event, so please an applause for him. Thank you for the audience for coming here today, and thank you to everyone who helped in making this event possible.
Thank you for the organization.
Thank you for organizing.